Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today I'd like to make a very unusual gift bag. It is a bag that we can give a gift in, such as a bottle of wine or tools or knitting needles. Anything can go in this bag, but it is reusable. And it's one that has a different shape to it, so it's more of a pocket than a bag. And what we're going to need to make for this is a pair of jeans, or at least one leg of that jean. I like to use men's jeans for this because it does give me a bigger leg, which gives me a bigger gift bag. And I'm going to cut off a portion of this leg, but I do want it all to be even. So I'm going to take the hem and make sure that it matches. Smooth out that jean, keeping this nice and tight so it stays flat. Now I'm going to measure. And I'm going to use the hem as my straight measurement. And I'm going to measure down 20 inches. I'm going to take a second ruler and just have it go right along that edge and cut that leg right off. So when I turn this around, you are going to notice that the edge is not the same. And that's okay, because we're going to be able to straighten that up after. I want this seam that is very flat and has the double row of stitching in the center front. I'm not worried about this piece in the back. I want this in the front. But what I want to do is put a hole in the center top. Just this top piece, not the back side. Now I'm going to need a hole that something is going to fit in, such as a bottle of wine, and big enough to put our hand in. This particular circle is 4.5 inches, and that's really a nice size to work with, but you can make it any size you'd like. So up at the top, we need to draw that circle. I am going to center it, and I'm going to have it come down about 1.5 inches and draw that circle. Once I've drawn that circle, I'm going to be able to cut that circle out. If you're not sure that this is going to be big enough, whatever you're gifting, just put it in and see if it is going to fit. You can always make it bigger, so start smaller and go up in size. Now I'm going to take this to the machine and I'm going to do 2 rows of stitching all the way around. It is denim, so I would recommend a denim needle and some denim thread. Turn the bag so you can see the outside. Then you're going to be able to work this around in the sewing machine. I always like to practice stitching on my scrap first, and now I can come into here. I am looking at the wrong side, which means when I bring this into my machine, I am going to be stitching on the right side. This is just an easier way of stitching because I do want my denim thread on the top. And the first row of stitching, I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch all the way around. So I'm going to stitch a little bit and then stop and readjust. Just keep readjusting until this fabric is flat and you can follow that edge. And if you have a needle down position, this is definitely the time to use it. And that gives us a beautiful first row of stitching. Now I want to do a second row. I'm going to take those threads off, put them to the back, and tie them off. Once that knot's done, let's start that second row of stitching. And I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch and go all the way around and tie it off when you come to the end. So I have that hole stitched, and I'm going to stitch some side seams. So while this is still on the wrong side, I'm going to straighten it up so that seam is semi in the center, and just ignore that back seam. And every pair of jeans is going to tell you where that seam is going to be. From here I'm going to stitch 2 side seams, and yes, this is the wrong side. So I want to take this and press it flat. You can see that my seams are not lining up, and that's okay. Just let the jeans lie flat on their own. These 2 rows of stitching are going to make the bag come in. What it's going to do is duplicate this little pleat. So we're not going to be cutting anything, we're just going to make a permanent pleat. So start as close as you can to the top and stitch down a tiny itsy bitsy little seam allowance. So it really is an itsy bitsy tiny one. I did tie off a knot on this end, but when we go to the other end, you can just leave that because we are going to put a box bottom on. Turn this to the right side. So that stitching line is going to push that in. So it's going to be like this bag. It's staying inside. Now we're going to stitch so that we have this nice flat edge. So it's going to be done in a very similar way. From that seam that I stitched, I'm going to measure over an inch and go down 1.5 inches. This measurement that we are doing needs to make sure that it does not go over top of that hole. So if you need to adjust that size, you can. The idea is the bottom here is wider than the top. So I want to pull it in so it looks a little bit more straight. So on this pair of jeans, 1 inch and 1.5 inch will look fine. So I'm going to draw the one line and that second line. And I'm going to fold in half right on that line. And when I do that, but you can see where it's going to be very close, which is fine. I just don't want to stitch into this area. So you might need to adjust that. So I'm going to stitch along that drawn line and on that second. And we're going to do that to both sides of the bag. Once we've finished stitching those lines, I would recommend giving this a good press, and you'll be able to see where we're going to have that nice pleat to go into the inside. We're now going to be able to straighten up and finish the bottom. So match up those sides, use a ruler, and match up those edges the best you can, and straighten up that bottom. Once that's straightened, we're going to be able to turn this so we're looking at the wrong side so we can finish the bottom. We need to line up those first 2 rows of stitching that we did and those seconds. And what we want to do is stitch from that second seam to the second seam. We're only going to stitch into this area. Back stitch, stitch over, and back stitch here. We now have these 2 holes on the bottom, and that's where that pleat was. And we're going to be able to box this in. We want to match up this seam to this seam right here. So we're just pulling that seam flat. And you'll see that we now have this little point on both sides. The center seam and the bottom seam are going to match up. And I do want to stitch so I'm close to that seam, but I'm straightening it up. So what we're looking at is approximately 1.5 inches from that point. So the stitching line is coming inside of the bag, not towards that point. And I need to do that to both sides. Those 2 rows of stitching are going to square that bottom up for us. And we can trim a little bit of that point off. Now, if you would like, you can do a zigzag stitch along these corners to clean it up and along the bottom. That is strictly up to you. Now we're going to turn this right side out. I want to put a piece of cardboard or something in the bottom of this bag just to really give it that sharp bottom. So I'm going to need to measure this. And your bag is going to be different, so it's going to be a personal measurement. So I'm going to need 3 inches by 6 inches. This is going to be washable, so we're going to be able to take that cardboard out and replace it whenever we need to. But we can see how that really does give it that nice shape. Now we need to work on the top. The bag is going to be used through this hole, not through this area. So we're going to close this up and put a handle. I have a little piece of trim I'm going to use. It's approximately 13 inches, but you can go larger or smaller, whatever you'd like. This is a little too wide for me, So I'm going to fold that in half and just stitch it in half. Now that that's been folded in half, I'm going to be able to put it inside. So really, any handle has a possibility. If you'd like, you can take the handles off of these old bags and use them, or use some old trim. I'm going to place that inside and make sure it comes a little bit below that hemline. If you'd like, you can stitch this down, but when we do close the bag, it will stitch it down. So I do want to stitch along this edge. Now this is a lot of fabric to go through, so I would recommend going below that area. It's still going to catch in that handle and close off the bag at the same time, but we don't have to go through all of that thickness. So keep that in mind when you are putting those handles in. And a zipper foot will work really good to stitch along this edge. So I have the zipper foot on, and I've moved my needle all the way to the right. I do want to stitch right close to that edge. This is a big area to get over. If I have the machine do it, the foot is going to be like a wedge, and it's going to fight to get over this. So what we want to do is even out the playing field. So that piece that I cut off, I'm just going to roll it until I get that size. I'm going to start and put my needle down into that area that I want to start. Pull those threads out of the way and put this right behind. So now you can see that that foot is staying straight, and that's what the machine needs. And now slowly start stitching. And you can see how this is just getting pushed out of the way. And then I'm going to be able to stitch along. When I get to this heavy spot, you can see where that is wanting to come up already. So I'm going to put something behind it. Having just that little piece behind, you can see how that foot has been straightened up. With the denim needle, the machine can go through the denim. It's when the foot is at this angle that it's fighting against it. It's causing a wedge, like the wedge in a door. It's trying to stop the machine. So what we need to do is just level that out and start stitching. And if we need to move that every once in a while, by all means, just move it and stitch. When we're coming to the end, we're not going to have a problem because we're not getting over anything. Just stop at that edge, and then we're going to pull that thread to the back and tie it off. You can see where my Bernina had no problem stitching over that denim. No skip stitches. It's a nice, flat, strong seam. We just need to make sure that that foot is always straight when we're sewing. This is now done. This can hang up on a door. This can hang up on a hook. It's a great little gift bag, and it will fit all sorts of things. That cardboard just sort of keeps it into that nice square shape. This is a great thing to give as a gift bag, which means they're going to be able to use it even when whatever inside is done. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter. It's all free under Sew Very Easy. And be sure to make every day a Sewtacular day. Bye for now.